Welcome to CCAI's interview with artist Zoe Bray and exhibition tour of her face-to-face show in the Courthouse Gallery. Enjoy.
Hello, I'm Sharon Ross with the Capital City Arts Initiative. We're here in CCAI's Courthouse Gallery and with Zoe Bray, the artist with our exhibition titled Face to Face Contemporary Portraits. And we're thrilled to have Zoe here to talk about her work. Welcome, Zoe.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Sharon.
So tell us about this portrait. It seems to be of somebody very familiar.
Yes, this is a portrait of myself with my daughter, who's now just turned 7, so some time ago. And we were living in Jerusalem at the time. And so I painted this portrait looking at myself in the mirror. And I had no on my back, and I was collaborating with another artist at the time. We were working on painting each other. So that's the person here in the back, an artist from Jerusalem. And this was an interesting exercise. I make a point of painting a self-portrait every year, but not every year do you have a baby on your back. So that was the tough part, was making sure that I captured this baby, my daughter Noah. She wasn't the best model, and she would stand still, but so I had to really go in there and capture her.
So did she put up okay with being still for the amount of time it took to paint the portrait?
She hung in there on my back for some time, but yes, she'd be turning around, and so every time she would turn in that direction that I needed, I'd quickly go for it and grab that.
Work.
Thank you. So yes, and then she'd look away, and then I'd focus on other parts of the painting, and then as soon as I would see that she was looking that way again, then quickly get that other detail in. So it was fun. It's definitely a story for me to remember.
Good. Well, it's a beautiful piece, and I'm glad. So you have in your hand the same brushes that are, or similar brushes that are in the painting and your palette. Tell us about the palette and your brushes.
Yes. So I paint it's called alla prima, which basically means really direct painting. So there's no drawing before, it's really immediately paint, and I just have a limited palette, which is black, blue, red, yellow, and white. And with this is what's so exciting about painting naturalistically, is that with this limited palette you can get pretty much all the colors and nuances that you see looking around you in nature. And so yes, I have various paint brushes in my hand of different sizes for different kind of brush strokes. Obviously, when I was painting Noah, I had to use a much thinner paint brushes. But then also a paintbrush for each color or each tone. And so you mix it here on the spot, and then you go for it straight.
Zoe, all the paintings in this exhibition are oil on canvas, except for this one. So tell us about the medium and creating it.
Yes, so this is charcoal on brown board. And charcoal is just a wonderful medium to work with. And I love going back to that from time to time, because it's really going back to very primordial medium. That's what cave people and caves would use, burnt wood. And this is of Francis Malraux, who's an artist here in northern Nevada, absolutely amazing artist, and also now runs a gallery up in Tahoe. She posed for me during one of these fantastic events that took place in Reno a few years ago called the Nada Dada. So I hired a room and made a show in this motel, and Frances came and posed for me. And it was the occasion as friends to hang out and to just get back to this medium. So it's mainly charcoal, and then there's white chalk to bring out the highlights.
Did you have a comment about did she talk about the necklace that she wore?
That's right. So Frances chose how to present herself, what clothes to wear. And she had this necklace, which, so Frances posed for several days. I believe it was 3 or 4 days. And so the first couple of days you focus on the outline, and you start to zoom in, because the most important thing at the end of the day for the portrait is the face, and particularly the eyes. And as I was zooming in, thinking going from dark to light, of course this part, the chest, is also important, and so I wanted to highlight. And then there was this necklace, which I absolutely loved, but then I was thinking, well, maybe that's a distraction, because I want to focus on Frances. So I asked if she could take it off, and she said, absolutely not. I cannot. This is a present from a friend back from, Frances comes from New Zealand, and it was a Maori friend who gave this necklace to her, and it's an honor to have received this, and it's just something you cannot take off. It's there with you for life. And that I was really struck by that, and it inspired me to definitely put it in as well as part of the portrait.
Wonderful story. Good. Frances, tell us about this painting. I believe his name is Jules, and where did it happen? There's a story here.
So Jules is a friend I made when I was living in Florence, in Italy, which is where I trained as a painter. And at the time I was just exploring the area on my bicycle, and there was this monastery, really beautiful monastery, and I got to hang out there, and I was drawing and painting the monks who were living there. They were retired monks, and Jules happened to work there. He was the caretaker, and so he is from the Ivory Coast, and as an Ivorian he speaks French, which is my native language, and so we just hit it off and chatting in French, and so at one point I invited him to come over to my studio down in Florence, and he posed for this portrait. And I made several portraits of him, and this is the one that I kept myself as a kind of memento. And I don't recall exactly what we were talking about, but all sorts of things, personal stories. And usually I try to, what's important for me is precisely this face-to-face interaction, that we're really looking at each other, and the portraits are kind of acknowledgement of each other and a collaboration. But there was one point when we gazed off, a daydreaming moment, a moment of silence, and I chose to capture that. So it's that moment of we're together, because also in his world, or I'm also in my world painting, but it's a moment of pause.
It's a beautiful piece. Thank you. Zoe, Marie-Louise is a colleague of yours, and tell us about Marie-Louise and this painting.
So Marie-Louise is a very touching story for me, because when I moved to Reno from Europe in 2011, I went to Gardnerville at one point in the summer to attend my first Basque festival. It was a Basque picnic there. And then with my colleagues from the the Center for Basque Studies, where I was working at the time, we walked into the JTs, and this Marie Louise, whom I didn't know, just came up to us to greet us, and I got chatting with her, and it's then that I discovered that actually we had I knew her family back in the Basque Country, the family of her father, and that I had lived on this farm, which belongs to her family. And so that was just really, really touching. Having just arrived in this new place, my new home, and not knowing anybody and having that direct connection back home was really powerful. And so yeah, at one point I invited her to post for me at home in Reno, and she kindly accepted and made that trip. At the time, there was the old 395, so it was a much longer trip from Gardnerville to Reno. But she came and posted for me several days, and she brought with her a portrait of her father, which we decided to put into the portrait as a way of making again that connection and the story of her. Painted Marie Louise, so that was in 2011, and then I got to know her brother, who is co-owner with Marie Louise of the JTs. And so a few years later, I went to visit Jamie in Genoa, which is where he lives on a ranch, and got to paint him there. And so his portrait is also in this exhibit.
So Zoe, you mentioned using the site size technique. Can you talk about that with this painting of Jesus?
Yes, so the site size technique is basically a way of painting from life. You paint the size of the portrait is the same size that you see it. So if I want to paint a life-size portrait, then I will have the person posed right next to the portrait, and then I'm standing back far enough where I can see both the portrait and the painting together, and I can make this direct comparison. So I would be here, and Sharon, if you were Jesus, you would be standing closer to the portrait, and I would be looking at you and the painting, going in there, making that mark, going back to see if I've made a correct brushstroke. So this back and forth, so it becomes a kind of dance, but it's a way to really understand what you're seeing and making sure that you've got a correct interpretation, visual painting interpretation of nature and the real of the person.
Well, I have a story on this painting. We had a group of ladies from Reno come to see the show earlier this week, and one of them was completely charmed by this painting, and her comment was, it looks like he could walk, the eyes grabbed her, and she said it looks like he could just walk right out of the painting and be in the room.
Oh, sweet, touching.
So she was loved it.
Yeah, that's very touching, because that is also the aim, is that really you get to connect with the portrait as if it were the real person, and that they're really coming out there. And given it's an accumulation of several hours together, several days, there is a lot in there that I'm hoping then comes out again. I should add actually that PBS Artifacts did a segment on me when I was painting Jesus, and at one point, whilst I was painting and he was posing, and at one point Martin Zillat, the PBS cameraman, was filming, Jesus started to sing, because he is a singer, he's a Becholadi, and so he improvises verses, and so on the spot, as we were all working, he started to sing about the experience of us being all together, which was absolutely lovely. Jesus and a few others, actually all the Basque portraits that are in this exhibit, I took them to the Basque Country before the lockdown in 2019, and they were scheduled to come back here a year later, but then the lockdown happened, and so they stayed there a bit longer, which in a way was good. They continued touring around in France and Spain, but I was able to finally bring them back in the summer of 2021, And so when I set up Jesus' portrait back here in this exhibit, and then I brought Jesus over to see it, it was really touching to see his reaction and to reflect on seeing his portrait again after all the craziness that we've gone through with COVID in these past years. So when he came here and saw his portrait again, he was inspired again to sing some improvised verses right here beside his portrait.
So Zoe, tell us about this painting of Ron Perigari.
Yes, so Ron Perigari is Supreme Court judge here in Nevada, and I got to know him when I worked at the Center for Basque Studies, because he is of Basque lineage on his father's side. And so this is an informal portrait. I invited him to come pose for me at home in Reno. And he came one day, and so he posed for me, and then he told me that he'd hurt his hand, and that so he was going to have an operation. And so the next time he came, he had this plaster on. And so I was like, oh, okay, how shall I start dealing with that new detail in the portrait? So I decided to paint it in. And then the following, a few weeks later, there were quite a few intervals between each pose, as he was busy, and so was I. And then when he returned, plaster had disappeared and the plaster cast was off. And so I was in this conundrum of what shall I do now? And I was going to go back to just painting his hands and having a more simple portrait. And I thought, well, no, but that's actually, it's interesting. Each portrait, in a way, has a story or several stories. And I thought, well, this is, in a way, this is part of it. And this is an informal portrait. Let's just put that back in, or keep the plaster cast there, because it was an important part of that time that we were together. So there it is.
Together face to face.
Yes.
Zoe, as part of this exhibition, you created a fun guide. So tell us about the fun guide.
Yes, so a fun guide is basically what I call a little treasure hunt game for children and adults to do. It's something that I like to do with my exhibits when possible, just to get visitors more involved in seeing artworks. It usually encourages them to look up close, look back again, reflect on what it's about and how they maybe identify or engage with it. And I was able to do this fun guide for the exhibit here at the Courthouse, thanks to a grant I got from the Nevada Arts Council, an ARPA fund. And so I got, the idea was that just people passing by would maybe pick it up and have fun with it. And then I also got friends and their children to come over, and classes from some of the schools here in the area.
Well, it's been fun watching adults and children use the fun guide and actually go through and look for which eye is where and which painting and which hand and who's barefoot and which painting. And so it's a beautiful suggestion. It's wonderful. I'm so glad you did that.
Thank you. Yeah, the idea. So I produced it in Spanish as well, so English and Spanish. And and then at the end is inviting people to also have a go at doing your own portrait or an imaginary portrait or whatever, but just have fun engaging with drawing and painting.
Well, super. So all the supplies are here. If visitors want to come in and use the fun guide and do their portrait. Thank you. Zoe, this piece titled Helma and Nathan, you painted in Reno, and I believe it's your most recent painting in the exhibition.
It is indeed, yes, and I painted this so during the lockdown, which was a tough time for painting portraits, because being face to face is just so important for me. Getting to know the person, capturing who they are, getting that connection going between us. And so yes, luckily Helma is a good friend and neighbor, so there was this possibility with her to be not have to worry about social distancing and masks and all that. And so she came to hang out at my place and with her lovely son Nathan. And there was that beautiful intimate moment at one point. And so that's what I chose to capture. And this again kind of goes differently to the other portraits, where I really make sure we have this we're looking at each other. Here, what I realized was more important was the connection between them two. Helma with Nathan, and Nathan looking back at her. And so this is what I focused on in this portrait. And again, I was thinking, well, how to highlight that? There's so much going on with the beautiful arabesque of the chair and the beautiful colors. But what is it that's most important in this painting? And how do you guide the viewer to that? What I think the viewer, what I would like the viewer to appreciate. So I had to figure out a bit how to work the background, lighten some parts and darken others, to get to what I thought was important.
Well, you did a beautiful job. It's lovely. And it's hard to not continue to look at Nathan's eye looking at his mom.
That's great, yes.
So Zoe, thank you ever so much for doing this exhibition. The show will be up through February 10th, 2022. And as part of the exhibition, we commissioned an essay by Perrette Culpa, who happens to be in Pennsylvania, but has a good Carson City, Northern Nevada connection. So she was able to do a studio visit with Zoe to see the work in person. And we are most grateful to our funders, our supporters, and we invite everybody to come see this lovely exhibition. Thank you, Zoe.
And thank you again, Sharon, for inviting me into Capital City Arts Initiative.